Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rafuse. Told you at the end of episode last week that Justin will not be here. So, in his place, joining me, Mr. Sam B. Albuquerque, at Sam B. Albuquerque on Twitter, sports reporter for the Spartanburg Herald-Journal. If you are familiar with this show, you've heard Sam on here multiple times. I am super excited to have him back. Last time he was on here, if you're watching on the podcast in the video form of just search on YouTube at the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. Sam had an Arsenal jersey on. He's got a France jersey on today. It's a much, much better improvement. We're really happy for him. I'm always excited to welcome you on, but I'm a little more excited to welcome you on with that on.
See, it's an ironic wear because I'm Brazilian and you know, one of these little stars came at an expense in '98 of my Brazilian national team. So so I actually hate France. I don't actually. France is one of those teams that are like I love to hate. You know what I mean? Because they're such a good team and they're so emotional. You'll see them win World Cup. They'll be the best team on the field, and then they won't get out of the group stage because there's some sort of infighting. The French are just they're fickle people, and I think that's why I enjoy them so much.
Yeah, I mean they're just like you hit it on the head. They're French. Like there's no other way to describe exactly what it is. And I mean me, I love Paris. Paris is one of my favorite places.
Yeah.
Not my favorite on earth. But there's just you're right. There is something unique about the French. I mean, that is kind of a fitting tie because we're going to go down to San Antonio. Obviously, we're going to hit the Jrue Holiday trade. That'll be coming down here in a few minutes, but we do want to go down to San Antonio. Of course, the big story in San Antonio, the big Frenchman, Victor Wembanyama, but a little bit of a extension here for Devin Vassell, 5-year, $146 million extension. So I think little is probably the understatement there of the century. But yeah, I mean, Vassell drafted by the Spurs in 2020. When you look around the cornerstones as this team begins to figure out who they like and who they want to put around Wembanyama, like he clearly has solidified himself here. He's 23 years old, 11th overall pick. All the way up to 18.5 points last year. So, he's definitely been increasing. ESPN says he's up by 6 points in each of his 3 NBA seasons so far. Good catch and 3-point shooter as well. So, but I think it's just funny watching the casual reaction because NBA contracts as they start to get bigger. But I think for the first time, a lot of people were like, whoa, you got guys like Devin Vassell getting the bag like this. And he's been good. That's the thing. But it's hard to blame people not watching San Antonio the last year or two.
Yeah, he was good for about half a season on a team that won 22 games. So it's hard for anybody, even people like you who love the NBA. I consider myself more of a casual these days than I used to be. But still, Devin Vassell. You look at he's a 22-year-old player who can hit threes, and he's been hitting threes better and better as he's increased his 3-point shot. So that's always the thing that's a big sign for me. And as I if a person's scoring more points and they're shooting better from three, is you look at the amount of shots he's taken. So he went from 2.4 in his first season to 5.4 last year or 2 years ago, and to 7 3-point shots a game last season, and he's increased his 3-point percentage. And so you look at that and the way the NBA is playing, you look at the fact that Victor is going to be a guy who's going to be ball centric. Who knows if Pop is going to let him run the pick and roll, if he's going to be the roll man. But you got to assume that putting Devin in the corner and he's hitting those catch and shoot threes at a consistent clip, it's usually a good choice. The only question here is, did you pay him a little early? Could you have held out? But if he goes in his first year with Victor really kind of getting that sort of attention and he's getting all these open shots in the corner, maybe you couldn't get him at this price. Maybe he averages around the same amount, but he's shooting 45% from three or something crazy like that. And obviously you have the rookie contract extension in place where you have some control there, but maybe you're going to have to pay him more money because a qualifying offer comes in from Sacramento or my Lakers or something like that, and it's a lot more money. So I understand the bet here, and they obviously know the kid inside the building better than we do. So if they're willing to give him that sort of money after 38 games last season and a market improvement, I usually tend to trust R.C. Buford and Greg Popovich with this kind of decision, especially with a team that may not make the playoffs next year, but is on the rise from a team that was very bad this past season.
Well, the reality, too, is they're just not paying anyone right now. So even if the contract ends up stinking, it's not really clogging up your books. It's the type of guy that you take a flyer on. Like you said, I mean, I think you nailed it with the 38 games point. Like, this is a smaller sample size than you're probably used to for this development. But I mean, all the offensive numbers are good, both counting stats and advanced numbers. Defense leaves a little bit to be desired, but again, he's 22 years old. Like, I'm not really, and you do take his defensive numbers because they were positive his first 2 years in the league. And again, maybe that goes to that 38 game sample size. I think you're right, though, in terms of, when you look at guys who put up numbers on bad teams, especially with the, just traditional counting numbers, you always just have to take a look behind and see if they're empty calorie shots or not.
Mhm.
Is it just because it's like somebody has to score on these teams? And with Devin Vassell, I don't think it was empty calories. Like, I think these are, he wasn't out here jacking. Like, of course, he increased his shot attempts, but he wasn't basically gunning on a bad team. Like, this feels like it was real improvement, not just I'm getting 40 shots a game.
Yeah. I mean, he shot what, like 15 times a game, something like that. I don't know. I don't know if it didn't even lead the Spurs in points, and it was probably close to as efficient as Keldon Johnson, who led the Spurs in points last year.
Yeah.
And definitely more efficient from 3-point. About like point, I guess 5% better from three than Johnson was, and it's one of those things, is how you get those buckets, right? And Vassell isn't this guy who's dribble, and then try to shoot. He's been, like you said, a rather efficient catch and shoot 3-point player. And defensively, you can see the athleticism there. You can see, especially you have to be smart to play for Pop. And that's one of the other things, is you got to be smart to play for him. So even if you're not great athletically on ball, you're going to be okay defensively off ball, and that's usually what happens with a Popovich player. And you look at the guys around him. Trey Jones can be a feisty defender. Jeremy Sohan is an amazing defender. You're bringing in, obviously, Victor, who's going to be that protect the paint kind of guy. I think you start to see a team start to formulate, and I don't know if this is going to be a great team next year. I don't think it's going to be, but I can see the flashes, and especially if Victor is who we think he is. If Keldon and Devin and Trey can give you somewhere between a combined 50 to 55 points a game with whatever Victor's putting up, you're gonna play close games next year, and hopefully that attracts more people, more free agents to San Antonio to play with Victor, or at the very least, it starts to help develop the core of a young nucleus that's going to, hopefully be the Tony Parker, Manu, Tim Duncan kind of team in the next, 5 years.
Yeah, I do think you're right in the sense that this is a younger team who will show flashes next year. And I think that's what you're looking for. Like, you want them to be competitive. You want them to see them start to build good habits. I think that will translate a little bit to winning. Like, I don't know that they'll necessarily be a 22 win team again next year. But at the same time, like, I'm not ready to just instantly pencil them in as a lock to make the playoffs, especially in a competitive Western Conference. And especially because as generational as Wembanyama is, and I really do, like, I think listen, we know how high you've been for people who listen to this podcast. I think he's that great too, but I don't think he's going to come in like LeBron James did, where it's like, oh my God, this kid is NBA ready right away. Like, I think even on the defensive front, like, it is going to take a little bit of time for him to adjust to the speed, for him to beef up. Like, this is just minor things. These are all saying that, hey, don't be alarmed the first game if he's not just lighting the world on fire. But I think there's that with the Spurs team too. Like, there will be a little bit of patience, but they're going to start making noise a lot here sooner than later. And that's kind of, you'll get to know, like, Devin Vassell and Trey Jones and some of the other guys you mentioned as well. Like, these are names that you're going to start to get to know as they're just also on TV more. There's no way around it. But you just want to see them build good habits. And obviously with Greg Popovich, you would imagine that those habits start to build. Welcome everybody to the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rafuse. Again, Sam B. Albuquerque here, in for Justin Cousart this week. You can watch the show on YouTube. Just search Drive and Dish NBA podcast. Of course, leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. We will read them on the show. If you're not an Apple user, Google Play Store, Spreaker, Spotify, TuneIn, Amazon Music, anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us. Like we said, Jrue Holiday trade going to be coming up. We're going to be talking all angles from it for Boston, what Milwaukee looks like now and how they match up. We're going to reevaluate the Blazers again post-Dame and post-Jrue trade, and of course, take a little bit of a look at NBA Media Day as well. Come on, Jimmy Butler dressed up like emo Jimmy. You think we're not going to talk about that, among other things? And there are definitely a few funny moments already. And now a word from our sponsors. All right, so coming back last episode, and if you want Justin and I's initial thoughts on the Damian Lillard trade, go back to last episode. That's where we talk about, obviously, Dame going to Milwaukee in the 3-team deal there with Portland and Phoenix. And, one of the things we talked about on that episode was we didn't think Jrue Holiday was going to be in Portland very long. He already had a lot of suitors. This is a guy who's clearly playing contending basketball at this point. You're not really bringing him on a rebuilding team. And it happened, I think, a lot quicker than maybe even we anticipated, with the deal already done between Portland and between Boston. Jrue Holiday going to Boston, Robert Williams III, Malcolm Brogdon, Golden State's 2024 first-round pick, and Boston's 2029 first-round pick are headed to Portland in the aftermath of the Jrue Holiday trade. But before we go back to the Blazers, because obviously there's a lot there, and we want to assess the Blazers really in the grand scheme of the picture now that you've seen what these moves look like. But for the Boston Celtics, this is a team that has certainly let a lot of key pieces, staples of that locker room go in Marcus Smart, in Grant Williams, now in Rob Williams, who is, one of the key. I mean, when they had that historically great defense 2 years ago, Rob Williams was the guy. Malcolm Brogdon, a casual sixth man of the year winner last year. But I got to tell you, Sam, I see the vision. I hate to see this, but I really see the vision. I'm worried about what the interior looks like. I guess that's my early thought without trying to get into too many points. Al Horford is 37 years old, and Kristaps Porzingis, while great last year, I think we know does have a pretty large injury risk at this point. Now with Rob out, that depth isn't there as much. But I don't know. Like, I look around, it's like you've got a happy Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown now both maxed and ready to go, not in the trade rumors all the time. And I look at Jrue Holiday, not just from the sense of all the big basketball that he's played here in the last few years, winning that championship with Milwaukee, but, you look at Milwaukee and Boston, to me, these are clearly the two best teams in the Eastern Conference right now. And I don't want to say you completely countered Milwaukee's main addition, but this is the perfect guy to guard Damian Lillard. Like, we've seen this movie before. Like, Jrue Holiday, come playoff time, is the exact guy you want chasing Damian Lillard around on the perimeter. Like, obviously, there's no buyer's remorse. That would be ridiculous. But you do wonder if there's that bittersweet element a little bit with Milwaukee letting Jrue go right to your rival when he knows he's going to cause you fits. But I guess give me your tempo on it, though, right away. What do you think for Boston? Do you think they're over Milwaukee now? How do you think this fit works? Do they maybe shake the locker room up too much? Like, talk to me.
This is a really complicated outlook in the East, I think, because initially my thought was, okay, what we know with playoff basketball, your rotation shrink to 6-7 guys. It's a lot slower. You can't just beat teams with hustle and with out rebounding, outrunning these kind of teams. You have to win in the half court, especially on offense. Is you have to have a way to score the basketball that is reliable, right? And so when I look at we know NBA basketball is played in pick and rolls. With pick and rolls, and you spread the floor, and if you crash too hard, you're gonna give up the three. And it's a question of whether or not you have guys that the defense is willing to crash on, or you have guys who are the defense is too afraid to get away from, who have that gravity, like Steph Curry, like Clay, to hold them at the 3-point line. And so when you consider all of those factors, initially my thought process was like, Dame and Giannis pick and roll, and Chris Middleton sitting in the corner is, that's it. That's playoff basketball. That's how you win playoff basketball. And so that was like, okay, they're clearly the front runner in my opinion, because when it comes down to it, that's going to be the way that you win playoff basketball games. And then you throw in Jrue Holiday over to Boston. It's like, well, Jrue's kind of the perfect guy to beat Dame. You know what I mean? You're talking about a smaller guard versus a very large, aggressive, physical guard on the defensive end. And you're like, okay, what does that pick and roll look like now with, who's guarding Giannis there? It's probably Jaylen Brown. It's a mixture of Jaylen Brown, Al Horford. And so when, you're gonna see Jrue Holiday fight over that pick and roll, and it's just, you start to consider these things, and it's like, I don't know who is on top when I try to visualize this game being played in my head. I think ultimately the question for me is going. You pointed out one of the specific pieces is the Celtics front court. obviously they've had to deal with an injured big man with Robert Williams for a while now. And so you put in Porzingis there, who's more of an offensive player, even though he's gotten significantly better in his career on the defensive end. Robert Williams is probably still a much superior defender, in my opinion, especially when you rotate him to the basket and he's defending the pick and roll guy as opposed to one-on-one defense against a bigger guy like Joel or other guys throughout the league. But you're still having to deal with a aging Al Horford who is still very good. He's been able to play good basketball when he's out there. Played like 63 games last year, and he was solid, in those games. So it's just a question of, can you trust Kristaps Porzingis to be that other big? I feel like you need another big man. You need a JaVale McGee on this roster, that kind of rim running big. And then on the other side of the ball for Boston is yes, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are going to be your primary offensive options. They've gotten better each year, and you like what Jrue Holiday brings to the table. He's a good offensive player. I don't trust Peyton Pritchard to be one of these guys, and I don't trust Derek White to be one of these guys that's a real setup type point guard. I think you're missing an added element that's achievable to find in free agency at this point, a JaVale McGee type in the front court. And I think you need like a Monte Morris kind of point guard where you get him for about 20, 25 minutes. He's like maybe they see that in Pritchard. I just haven't seen enough in Pritchard that tells me that he can be that guy who can play for 20, 25 minutes, even in crunch time, set it up, play solid defense, make the right passes, be a little bit of a threat from the 3-point line so defenses can't crash completely off of you. So when I take everything into account, I feel like I'm talking to myself in circles, because like I could point out flaws in each team, I could point out the matchup in each team, but I think I ultimately land where I first started. The Giannis Dame pick and roll is probably the most dangerous play in the Eastern Conference. I think you could talk about Jamal Murray and Jokic on the other side, but in the Eastern Conference, I think that's the most dangerous play and the most effective play. And granted, because they could do it in all aspects. Dame can still get to the basket. Dame can shoot better than anybody not named Steph Curry with the ball in his hands in the league. And Giannis is just probably the deadliest ball roller, I think, in recent history. Off of a pick, he's rolling to the basket with his hands up. Like who else would you rather have than that guy? And so I land there. I think I'm going with Milwaukee still, even though I like what Boston did. But I did have a question for you, because you brought it up, and I don't know if the answer is as clear as you made it out to be. If you're in Milwaukee, if you know that Jrue is going to go to Boston, do you still make this trade?
I don't think it's as clear as we make it out to be. I think there's a second of hesitation. You still make it every single time, because I think it's deeper. Like, to me, the other reason why I was so hype on this trade is because, to me, you took the Giannis red flag where he said, hey, maybe I won't sign the contract, and you went out and you took action. And to me, that's what serious franchises that try to maximize their window does. Look, that's the cost of doing business. And realistically, if you can't beat Boston, you're not going to beat Denver or whoever comes out of the West anyway. So I do think Giannis is the key. I think Giannis is going to have to dominate that series eventually. Like, he's going to have to pound the interior. There's no way around it. Because I do think, like, Jrue is the perfect pickup for Dame, man. The other guy that you talked about, who I think will be key for Boston off the bench, is Peyton Pritchard. Peyton Pritchard's a guy that they have really liked, and who has looked good at times in flashes, but then with more minutes has just flat out disappointed. I mean, in the playoffs last year, he had times where he just, he couldn't knock down 3-pointers. Like, he was getting the looks, they weren't falling. He's going to be a guy that they need to step up for sure. Your Derek White issues, I'm not quite as worried about, just because they have Jrue Holiday. Like, Jrue Holiday is going to be their main ball distributor. Do they maybe need another guy off the bench if Pritchard's not going to be a pure point guard? Like, yeah, but I think Derek White can play it too in small spurts, I should say. I think he's probably going to end up starting. Like, I would imagine the Celtics starting lineup is Jrue, Derek White, JB, Tatum, and Porzingis, with maybe Al Horford coming off the bench.
Yeah, you could see a Derek White, Al Horford kind of shift if they want to go bigger versus go smaller.
Like, that'll go with matchups. If you want a more traditional 2-guard deal, I mean, you could have JB play a little bit of the 2 as well. But you're right. I mean, there's a lot of, because I mean, Milwaukee, I think, has interior concerns as well. Like, Brook Lopez is 30, he's 37 years old, I believe, at this point. Yeah. So, like, that's definitely up there. But they also kept a lot of their guys too. Like Bobby Portis is still there. Pat Connaughton is still there. Like these are guys that have played minutes. They've won the title there in Milwaukee. It looks to be a really good series. And I look around at, Cleveland's intriguing if their guys take another step. You know me, like I'm the wrong person to talk about the Sixers. I'm so beyond jaded at this point. Like I don't even want to entertain them in the conversation.
I think I'm finally there with you. This season, I think I've always been a little bit more optimistic on the Sixers than you have. I think I've reached your level of it's not going to work out this year. It might not work out with Embiid.
They're going to be a 3, and we'll get into Embiid a little bit more as we get closer to media day. They're going to be a 3 or a 4 or a 5 again. Like I'm not suddenly going to suggest that they're going to fall off a cliff even without Harden, but
yeah,
I don't know how you look around and say that this team is going to be a threat to win the conference. Like short of just a bunch of players getting hurt, which obviously no one is rooting for. That's the only way I see it happening. Like there are other teams. The Knicks are intriguing a little bit. Miami is Miami. Like they were in the finals last year. I know that it's not landing Dame has been a pretty huge hit for them, to say the least. But
it's gotten somebody very emotional.
Yeah, a couple people to say the least. Because I want to get into Heroes comments too. But again, we'll save that for media day. I do want to go out to Portland for a little bit now in the aftermath of the Jrue Holiday trade. A number of first round picks here. DeAndre Ayton, of course, probably the centerpiece, no pun intended, player wise. But to bring Brogdon in for that veteran leadership, to bring Rob Will into like he's still a young guy who, while injured, I mean, pretty much look, he's as good of a vertical threat, like a rim runner as you get. The dude's everywhere on the defensive end. He crashes the board and he basically can go up and get any alley-oop you throw him. I don't think we're done Portland move-wise. Like Jeremy Grant feels like another candidate who's going to be right out the door. Brogdon is obviously, too, going to have a ton of value. Like, I know they want him in the locker room, but, like, I could definitely see a contender taking a swing on Brogdon. But, now all this is over, and you kind of look at this roster, at the state of it, with Scoot Henderson in there now as well, which I think is a key caveat. How much retooling do you think they need? I don't think anybody thinks this team is going to make the playoffs next year, but it certainly feels like, especially if Scoot can be as good as I think he can be, that they don't have to fully hit the ground running like they can with all these picks, kind of retool a little bit and not necessarily spend that one season going in the tank.
Yeah, it's a weird setup in Portland because I think they've navigated one of the hardest things I think any franchise can do, which is transition from a star to a potential other star. I feel like they've obviously you kind of pissed off Dame on the way out, which is never a good look. But if you take
Milwaukee, he'll be fine.
Yeah, which is I agree, but like it's just a couple of the things you hear about Joe Cronin and their relationship. But that's beside the point. Let's take away the that kind of stuff. When you look just strictly basketball X's and O's and what the franchise has done, I think they've navigated that really well and setting up a team that is going to be Scoot Henderson's team, Anthony Sidon's, Shaedon Sharp's team. I think they have the 3 young building blocks that they want to start the rest of their franchise with. The question is, what I think is the second hardest thing to do is how you go about developing that young core and surrounding them. Like when I look at the Magic, they've done something like that, with Franz and with Paulo Banchero and how they've gone about it. They've let the young kids kind of take the team, by the reins, and they've added a couple of younger veterans like Wendell Carter and you look through how the roster has been developed over the past couple of years, and they've gotten rid of the veteran pieces that our role players were never going to be the best player, but at any given night could have been the best player on the floor and score 20 or something, like a DeAndre Ayton, like a Malcolm Brogdon, like a Jeremy Grant. These are all guys who can average more points than a rookie Scoot Henderson or a young Shaedon Sharp or Anthony Simons maybe. But it's so you look at it, it's like, okay, what are you going to do with those, specifically those 3 pieces? When you look at Jeremy Grant, you look at DeAndre Ayton and Malcolm Brogdon. Do you want to keep them and have a pseudo competitive roster and kind of have a couple guys, especially Malcolm Brogdon, who has one of these great reputations around the league, around your young dudes to help them develop? Even Matisse Thybulle, who's been in playoff games. And so that's the question of do you trade those guys for more young assets? Do you let the young kids take control, or do you want the some of these veterans to kind of provide those bumper rails when you're bowling, that kind of thing, to ease them in the right direction, even though it may stunt their development from a more of a trial and error sort of thing, where you go out there and see what you can get done and you develop off of that. So it's this is the tricky part, I think, for Portland. But I think on an asset front, on what they've gotten for Dame essentially has been really effective. I've really been impressed with Joe Cronin. I know Mike Schmitz, who used to be at ESPN, is in that front office, especially after because of his relationship with Shaedon Sharpe. That really kind of from what I've read has really helped Shaedon's development and really helped convince Portland to draft him last year. And so it's interesting what's gonna happen. I've trusted them up to this point, but this is a whole different sort of trail to blaze.
Oh God, Sam, you're better than that.
I'm a dad. I'm about to be a dad.
You are that. I guess that's true. Yeah.
I have to get those in whenever I get the chance. But in all seriousness, this is a completely different sort of realm of management that you have to do now. It's one thing to isolate young assets and know that player is going to develop, and it's a completely other thing to actually develop them within the confines of an NBA franchise. And so the question now is going to be how these young players develop, because I think they've done a great job up to this point, collecting assets, collecting young players, and I think they've picked the right one. I love Scoot Henderson, and I really like what I've seen with Shaedon Sharpe. I think Anthony Simons, who's an Orlando boy himself, I appreciate his game, and so I think they have a good young core. And the question is how they go about dealing with these veteran pieces is really going to tell you a lot about what their thought process is moving forward. Also, just quick shout out, John Butler. He's from Christchurch Episcopal High School over here in Greenville, South Carolina. His brother and his dad were part of the state championship winning team last year that I got to cover. So he's a lanky guy who can shoot. So maybe he'll give you a little something on a 2-way contract.
All right, little upstate South Carolina love. You love to see it. The final,
a lot of talent up here, man.
Oh, and listen, I believe you. You got Zion, like right there. I know.
Yeah, Zion went to school like 3 miles away from where I live, so
like pretty good at basketball, one would say. Yeah. The final haul for Portland in all this was DeAndre Ayton, Robert Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, Toumani Camara, 3 first-round picks, 2024 Golden State, 2029 Bucks, and 2029 Celtics. They also have the 2028 and 2030 swaps with Milwaukee. I agree with you about Portland's young core. I like Shaedon Sharpe a lot too, specifically. The one, and it's funny though, you mentioned the 3 vets. You mentioned Jeremy Grant, you mentioned DeAndre Ayton, and you mentioned Malcolm Brogdon. And I have radically different opinions on what you do with all of them, because I think I think you do strike a balance a little bit. Jeremy Grant is your prime ship him out candidate. Like, he's not a bad guy to have in the locker room, obviously. Like, Jeremy Grant's been a pro for a long time, but it just feels like he has value elsewhere. Obviously, the problem is the contract, but it feels like there's going to be some sort of contender taking a swing at him. With Brogdon, it's because you're right. I think from a leadership perspective, from the mentoring the young guys, you're right. Malcolm Brogdon is one of the more highly respected guys around the entire league. Like, every franchise he's been on has really spoken highly of him. And I do think you're right. He could really help develop those habits. I'm also sitting here and going, hey, the reigning 6th man of the year probably long-term does not fit this Portland piece. And you can really, really recoup that value right now. But I think he's one where you kind of can go a little bit of both ways. I'm leaning towards out the door like Jeremy Grant, but I think that's more maybe a mid-season type deal. With DeAndre Ayton, you're keeping him. I mean, you go out and you get DeAndre Ayton, to me, I mean, this is a reclamation project because his value can't really get much lower. Like, I don't think anybody think Ayton stinks, but, I think after a few flameouts with Phoenix, it feels like they were going through a culture reset down there. I mean, this is a former number 1 pick now who has a chance to just truly be the centerpiece in his own offense. Like, for me, if you want to rewrite the book and rewrite the narrative, like, what an opportunity for DeAndre Ayton here, who's still pretty young. He's already paid now, so you don't have to worry about that. To me, he's the one that you take the flyer on, you keep, and you hope that you can develop him. I mean, even if he becomes your 2nd or 3rd option moving forward, like, there's still a lot to like about DeAndre Ayton's game. You hope that you can get his motor up. You hope that you can just get him motivated playing every night. But I mean, he's going to have the opportunity to show out. Like, if you wanted to be the guy, here you go. Like, this is Portland. This is the opportunity right now.
So do you view Ayton as a long-term play for Portland? Because I'm with you on the fact that he is a reclamation project and his value is low, and this is a really good opportunity to increase his value by letting him play and show that he is, a motivated DeAndre Ayton who feels like, he was disrespected in Phoenix and goes out there on a young team and is the best player on that young team and constantly fed the ball. But my question is not necessarily whether he gets traded now, because I think all of these guys could be traded, come the trade deadline. It doesn't have to be, at this point in the year. It could be around the All-Star break. It could be around these moments. But I think long term, they're all candidates to move on from, including Ayton. So that's my question to you. Do you view it as a short term thing or as a long term? Because long term, when I look at Ayton, I can't see another scenario. This feels like Phoenix 2.0 for Ayton. Is that there's young players around him. And there's players who are going to come onto this team or develop into better players or better options than DeAndre Ayton. This is Scoot's team. This is Shaedon Sharpe's team. It's not going to be Ayton's team for the next 3-4 seasons. It might be Ayton's team for the first 50 games of the season. But I think by year 2, by year 3, by year 4, Ayton's no longer the centerpiece of this roster, and by then he's going to be close to 30 years old, and maybe you don't get that same sort of value from an Ayton who's 25, 26 and is coming off the best 50 game stretch of his season because he's the primary option on a bad Portland team.
Yeah, but I mean, he's 24 right now, and I guess that's the thing is, so I think, is there a medium answer? Like, I think in the next 3 to 4 years, he's definitely part of their long term. Like, I think they're absolutely going to try and get everything they can out of Ayton. Like, I think they're going to give him 2 years to just fully develop him. Like, best case scenario, if he's not working out for you, he entirely rehabs his value and you go out and trade him. And that's the thing is, like, they'll always have that flexibility and that option if it's not working. But Ayton, to me, is the one guy with the upside where it's like, hey, you give him the keys, it works out, and he can be like, because I agree, I think Scoot's the best player on the team, and I think it's going to be his team long term. But like, Ayton could be a really good number 2, number 3, I think, if everything pans out. Like, so in that sense, he could almost play himself into the long term. But that's why I think they go out and got him. Like, he's one of those young guys who you feel like you can still mold a little bit, who hasn't in theory entered his prime yet. And so to me, he has more, like, there are a lot of reasons to keep him around. Like, I don't think there's any planet where Portland moves DeAndre Ayton this season, put it that way. Like, short of something going tremendously wrong, or there just being some obscene superstar package out there that they have to facilitate, to me, I think he's there this year at the bare minimum. But I think you probably 2-3 years of Ayton now at this point. I think you're almost committing to that.
I think you're committing to holding on to him at least until, obviously, and I think the NBA trade rules prevents. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I know at least till the trade deadline this season, he'll be a part of that starting rotation for we're talking about if he stays healthy for about 30 minutes, 35 minutes a game. But I think anywhere from this trade deadline to next trade deadline is a realistic timeline to move off of Ayton and flip him for assets and younger team, especially if you believe in this backcourt combo of Scoot and Anthony and Shaedon. So that's kind of where I'm at, because at this point, and then this is going to sound a little mean to DeAndre Ayton, I don't see it. I don't see a guy who's going to be not necessarily a starter on a championship team, but like a number 2 or number 3 player on a championship team. I see DeAndre Ayton as sort of a solid post-up big man who can kind of hit some shots, but ultimately is going to be a liability defensively and isn't going to provide the rim running pick and roll sort of athleticism that a Scoot and an Anthony and the Shaedon are going to require. So that's the kind of thing with DeAndre is if he can hit the ground running there, and because you're giving him all the touches in the paint, I think you can build up his value to a guy who can bring back 2 first-round draft picks, one of them being lottery protected. I feel like that's possible for a guy like DeAndre Ayton, and if I'm Portland, I'm sort of approaching it that way, because ultimately I just don't think his skill set is one that is. I think Robert Williams fits this team more than a guy like DeAndre Ayton does.
Yeah, well, and you got depth now with Robert Williams too, which is great. It gives you that little bit of optionality. I'm not entirely against you with Ayton, because you're right. I mean, his motor is an extremely big concern. DeAndre Ayton is, You know, when not to switch sports, but in running back or in the
Yeah.
NFL with running backs, there's always those guys who leave the meat on the bone, is the saying, where they'll hit the hole, they'll get you 2 to 3 yards, but if they had just read it a little better, you probably could have burst through and got like 6,
Yeah.
7, or really like hit the home run. It feels like that's what Ayton is, right? Like Ayton definitely, like, he doesn't stink. This is a guy that
No, not at all.
he averaged 18 points last year. He's been in double digits every single year, 10 boards a game. Like, his shooting percentages are good. But you're right. It's just like as soon as you get to meaningful basketball, like I just also have visions of Jock Landale playing better minutes for Phoenix in the playoffs than I do with DeAndre Ayton, your former number 1 pick, who was billed to be at worst the 3rd or 4th option on that team, which isn't an insult when you're playing with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. I mean, there was definitely, like, again, time to move on because that Phoenix team is
Yeah.
fully blown up essentially at this point. I mean, Book is still there, but that team that made the finals really doesn't exist like that anymore. Hopefully a fresh start is there for Aiden. I'm with you. Like, I struggled to see him getting, because you want to see him start to get into the conversation with the elite big men, right? You want to see him around
Yeah.
Jokic, around Embiid, around Anthony Davis, around even Cat for all the flack he gets. Like, I know Cat's kind of a meat left on the bone guy too, but to me, Ayton wishes he was Karl Anthony Towns right now.
Well, Cat fits in the modern NBA. You could stretch him out, and he can just sit in the corner and shoot threes, and he's effective on the offensive end in a way that Ayton is almost the opposite. The crazy thing is, and this is going to sound like, again, really mean to DeAndre Ayton, because it's an expectation thing, because he was the first overall pick, because we saw him dominate at Arizona when he was in college. But ultimately, I view Ayton like a guy like Nick Vucevic. Like, those to me are apples and apples comparison. And the thing
Yeah,
is, we don't blast Vooch like this. We look at Vooch as a guy who's, hey,
no, he's really
that guy
good.
could be yeah. But to me, they've been very similar players.
Yeah, I don't hate that comparison. You're right. That same tier where it's like you can get on an all-star team. You're definitely a good player. Like, there are scenarios where I can see you being the starting caliber, like, championship guy. But you're right. Like, I don't know if you're the guy to get us there. Like, you're the guy that just kind of facilitates in the process. That's an interesting comparison. I like that one a lot.
Yeah, honestly, I have Basketball Reference up on one of my screens here, and there's like a little video playing in the corner. I saw Vooch. I'm like, oh my god, they're
Yeah,
the same player.
it is. And I mean, Aiden's offensive game, because to me, he needs to get better defensively. Like, that's the one thing. And again, maybe that's a motor thing, but it just feels like the effort isn't there. Like, he's not crashing the
I
boards.
think
He's
it's
not
I
following
think
his
it's an
rotations.
athleticism thing. I just don't think he's a plus athlete. I think he's like a little bit of an above average athlete, because he's so tall, and he can move a little bit laterally. But he doesn't strike you as a guy like a Robert Williams, who can just move laterally from one side of the paint to the other and then just pop up in a second and block any shot coming in your way. Like, that's not his. He has good footwork, but it's just not. There's no explosion. Is the way I always view Ayton. It's like there's no explosion to his game. Period.
Yeah, well, right. And that just goes back to my kind of he's there. Like, that's just always what it's been with Aiden for me. It's the potential's there, but I'm with you. Like, I got it, because to me, it's not a skill issue. Like, that's what it all comes down to, is it's never been a skill issue for me. All the tools are there. It's just, you can't teach motor. You can't teach effort at the end of the day. Again, hopefully the reset is what we get out of DeAndre Ayton in Portland. I know they're certainly hoping for it. All right, NBA Media Day. Training camp is officially back in swing. We do want to end the show on a lighter note. Every team getting back in action. We're getting ready for the preseason. Stay tuned here in the next couple of weeks. We'll start to have kind of full previews and stuff like that. We're kind of going to go rapid fire. I don't really have an outline with this per se right now. It's just kind of like what caught your eye. I mean, the first one we have to talk about is, of course, our pal emo Jimmy Butler, coming off the year with the just super long dreadlocks. Now coming in, his official headshot has the part covering his eye. He's got the lip rings in. Like, I just appreciate that this is Halloween for Jimmy Butler, essentially. I mean, it's in October. It's fitting, but just, it's unbelievable that, and I heard 2K's already got the update too with him, by the way, with the hair. But I just absolutely love that that's going to be the picture gracing media guides this season.
So I think we've finally gotten to the point that everyone in the basketball community understands Jimmy Butler is a superstar. Not in necessarily in the and we can have the conversation about whether he's a superstar basketball player, but he is a superstar personality within the NBA.
Yeah.
And these are the kind of things, and he kind of did it last year with the dreads, but you didn't really think he would evolve to emo Jimmy, right? And I think that with him and the way he uses the media and social media, and he has his big face coffee thing, is that I think it's fair to say at this point, especially the fact that he's taken 2 teams to the NBA Finals as their best player. Jimmy Butler's a superstar, and I love this guy. I love his personality. I can't wait to see him, on a TNT broadcast when he does retire and decides to take this media thing to the next level. That's what I get the most out of Emo Jimmy is I think he understands how to use the media. He understands how to elevate his own brand, and the fact that he keeps playing basketball the way he does is just helping that out more. It's if he hadn't done, what was it, he hadn't gone to 2 NBA Finals as a best player on a team, how would we have perceived this? Probably more like, yes, it's a joke, but at the same time, like, there's a little substance to that. The fact that he might take this really, really seriously, this whole Dame thing, and we'll talk about Tyler Hero later, but it's kind of a joke, but it's kind of a statement. It's like, I am emotional right now, and I'm going to take it out on every defender who comes up on me because I'm Jimmy Butler, and I've taken 2 NBA teams to the finals.
I think Jimmy Butler, first off, is unequivocally a superstar, both on and off the floor. Like, I think anyone who's denying it after the second finals run is kind of crazy. Like, I know the regular season is not that, but like, look, this man willed them to the finals, essentially. Like, he's the guy. That team was probably not as good as at least 2 that they went through. And even to give Denver the little bit of play that they did. I mean, because that Denver team was bounds and bounds better than them on paper. To be able to even remotely hang with them the way they did, I thought was super impressive. I mean, he always has been. That's what's crazy. It's like Jimmy Butler was pulling up in the minivan. He's been a huge country music fan, apparently has like 45 songs recorded and says he wants to do an album with Morgan Wallen. I appreciate that he's swinging for the stars right away too. It's just straight up like, no, I'm not just going with any like normal country singer. I'm gonna go with the one right now. Jimmy's he's always been an incredible personality. And I mean, Miami I think is where it's just got to shown the most. Now that there's not as much, because Jimmy had that crusty rep, based on not really based on how Chicago ended, but it felt like it wasn't a great ending necessarily in Chicago. But then there were the rumblings certainly we know what happened in Minnesota. With Philly, there was the rumored rumblings with Ben Simmons. I think all that is ridiculous. And to me, especially in the case of Philly, he's been proven right about everything. But yeah, I mean, again, one of the best personalities in the NBA. You mentioned Tyler Hero. I did like, what do you say about Portland? He's like, well, I'm not playing good elite basketball over there. I want to play where the best are at, or something like that. Look, I appreciate Tyler talking heavy because, like, look, Portland did say we didn't want you. Like, you were the centerpiece of the package. Yep. Everybody knows it. And Portland said, nah, you're not good enough to really be the centerpiece of the package. So I can understand him talking heavy a little bit there. I don't think he's got the juice to talk that heavy, to be quite honest. Like, that Miami team went to the finals without him last year. Like, if anything, I think that probably doesn't look the way he wants it to. But I am really interested to see how Tyler Hero comes out this year. Like to me, you want to talk about Jimmy with the motivation. I think Hero's the one where you got to watch out. It's like you basically had the entire league saying, you're not good enough to be the centerpiece and a guy for Damian Lillard a few years after you were a starter on a finals team as a rookie. Like, if that's not going to put a chip on your shoulder, I don't know what else will.
I think we've gotten to such a weird place with Tyler Hero. Like, where Miami fans are overvaluing him, and then everyone else in the league is thinking that he cannot be a centerpiece for a Dame Lillard trade. And I think we've gotten into a really weird place, and the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, where Tyler Hero is a good young offensive basketball player who can shoot the ball, who can handle the ball, who can run a pick and roll effectively, will probably be a multiple-time All-Star when it's all said and done, and could be probably a second to third best player on a finals team. I think that's a fair statement to where Tyler Hero is, and especially when you look at a Dame Lillard trade, for me personally, when you look at what they got back in Jrue Holiday and those assets, I think. I'm not saying Jrue Holiday is not a better basketball player than Tyler Hero right now, but we're talking in 15 years, I could see Tyler Hero having a better career than Jrue Holiday. Like, it's not abnormal. It's not crazy to think that.
I'm gonna check you
option.
on 15 in that, my brother. You're alone there, but I feel you. Like I see it. I see it.
And
But
to answer the question, is Tyler Hero a more talented offensive basketball player than Jrue Holiday?
I don't know, Sam. I don't
What?
think so.
He's a better shooter. He's
definitely a better shooter.
at the same level of ball handler. I think Jrue Holiday is probably a better passer. And obviously
Yeah.
on the defensive end, we're not having that conversation.
Yeah,
but all-star selections are given by pretty much offensive statistics.
Yeah,
and
Jrue
so
Holiday's still making all-star teams though.
Yeah, but Jrue Holiday's in what, year 12, 13? Like, we're talking about
Jrue also made
year
one in
4,
2012.
5, 6.
Jrue made one in 2012 on the Sixers.
You're talking about a kid who's 23 years old and he's averaging 20 points a game, Kevin. Like, that's like, this is what I'm talking about. We're losing perspective. I'm not saying Tyler Hero's phenomenal. I'm not saying he's an all-star right now, but he's 23 years old and he averages 20 points a game on a team that went to the finals, Kev.
I agree.
I'm saying in 10 years out, this guy might make more all-star teams than Jrue Holiday. That's my point.
I think you're absolutely nuts on that point. I agree that we are undervaluing him. Like, I truly do. Like, I think we have collectively undervalued him because you're right. I think Tyler Hero is a good player. I think even in the years after, like, they were in the conference finals, he's a big part of that. Like you said, a dynamic offensive player. He can shoot the basketball. Little bit to be desired on the defensive end, but like, whatever.
I agree. I'm not even arguing that part.
He's played big minutes. I don't know, man. Jrue Holiday, like, he was already shown it at like 18 and 19. And I'm not saying Hero wasn't. Like, he balled out his finals year, but I'm just saying Jrue Holiday, the game aged really well.
A little perspective here. Jrue Holiday, he had 5 seasons. He was a little younger than Tyler when he came in the NBA. 5th season, he was 23 years old, averaged 14 a game. Tyler's averaged on New Orleans, who weren't that good. And he got hurt that year as well. He had 34 games. He's made 2 all-star teams in, 13 seasons in the NBA?
Yeah. He the one in Philly and the one in Milwaukee.
I think Tyler can make 2 all-star games. He's already showing that early in his career he's been a more effective offensive player than Jrue was.
I guess what it comes down
to. That's my point. That's my point.
Yeah.
It's not that he's a better player right now. It might not even be considered a better player later on. But I think all-star game-wise, when you look at the package that was traded for Dame, you got to, like, I think we've underestimated that Tyler Hero could have been that player. I don't think he's better than Jrue right now, and probably not couldn't net you back what you got if you're Portland. It's just a little underestimated for the rest of the league. Definitely overestimated in the Miami circles. I will point that out.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't disagree with that. I guess my greater point is that Jrue is such a special defensive player. And then on top of it, a pretty good offensive player. Where I'm like, Tyler Hero is a pretty good offensive player and a pretty terrible defender. Like, I guess that's just what I hang my hat on with Jrue, is that he has an elite, like, best in the league type in one category. I don't know that Tyler Hero has that. I will concede a little bit on the offensive end, but like you said, he's 23 years old. Like, I think that because he's been in the league a while too. Like, he broke out in the bubble year. He was super young. Like, I think that also may get lost because we've seen so much of him already, is where it's like, well, I feel like people think the book may already be written when, like you said, he's not even in his prime yet. Prime for most NBA guys is 27, 28 years old. We're still 5 years off from that. So definitely a lot to talk about there. My favorite joke besides Emo Jimmy is Kawhi said he might play for Team USA, and everyone was like, he doesn't even play for the Clippers. How is he going to play for Team USA? My
favorite part of the Kawhi presser was when he didn't know the resting rules. The new resting rules is like, huh? Where are they?
I mean, they're gonna have to learn. I mean, him and PG are gonna be on that split for sure. I did laugh too because I mean, speaking of Team USA, the reports have been going around that LeBron is orchestrating this effort. It's going to be his last go round, but like, he's talked to Steph, he's talked to KD, and it seems like everybody is in, which is obviously great for NBA basketball. But I did love Steph Curry catching himself when they asked him about it, and he's like, "Yeah, I talked to." Well, we've had some discussions, basically being like, he don't want to admit that like LeBron was orchestrating this whole go around, but obviously, as a Team USA fan, and I think they would have for the Olympics anyway. Like, we talk about this, like, the Olympics just always will have more clout than FIBA does. But I want to see those guys all out there together. Like, that bodes well for our hopes in Paris 2024.
My things is I hate the approach to international basketball that the NBA players have. And my biggest fear, like as I'm wearing a France jersey, is that soccer takes that approach. Because at the end of the day, international sports, when you see, especially the World Cup for soccer, is the highlight of my sporting year when it comes around. And when you have guys who don't show up to the FIBA World Cup and are like trying to convince other guys to join up for the Olympics, it diminishes the product for me. It's like, be all in or be all out. Like, I would rather it be the FIBA squad every year. You get these second tier stars and a couple role players, and you throw them against the world's best, because at least it's competitive over there. And then it's just like the American player saying from an immigrant, like, feels so arrogant to me when it comes to like these dudes are like, okay, we'll play, we'll go out there and we'll win a championship for you guys just because it might be my last go. Like, take it seriously or don't do it. Like, don't just do it when you feel like it. That's my thing, because I love international basketball. International basketball is really fun, especially when the teams like Germany and Argentina and Spain are playing against a U.S. team that, yes, are probably more talented than they are, but are pieced together and are kind of trying to figure it out. You see this team like with Anthony Edwards and Paulo Banchero playing center at certain points under Steve Kerr. And it's kind of fun to see like this hyper athletic team that is very young trying to figure out versus a team like Germany who has been playing together since they were kids, and they know exactly how to play basketball together, and see this talent beat out team chemistry and not necessarily good coaching, but coaching that's more developed and then over time. And so whenever these guys like LeBron and Steph and KD decide to just jump in for the Olympics, it kind of makes me a little mad. I'm not gonna lie, because I think you're not taking what should be a good product seriously. And at the end of the day, like, if you don't, and I'm not, and me more than anybody, I'm not this national pride kind of dude. Like, we'll talk about that off air. But it's more of it's a fun basketball product that you're making it not fun, because we know that at the end of the day, when LeBron, KD, and Steph are on the same court, doesn't matter who you're playing, you're gonna win that game. And I think it ruins, for the most, other than was it Athens in 04? Was it? I forget what. Yeah. Other than that year, when those guys are out there, you're pretty much gonna win every time. And I would be okay if you were committed to dominance, because I would like that. Like, okay, this team is like takes this seriously. But the fact that they don't kind of makes me upset. And I know it's kind of a bummer, because this is supposed to be a fun segment, but that's just how I feel about it.
No,
I
but
love the World Cup.
No, I get it though, and I do respect the passion, because you're right. Like, there is a part of me that's like, hey, if you're not with us in the trenches in FIBA 2022 and 2023 in the off years, it's like, why do you get to just show up, win a gold medal likely, and just cash out while you have all these other younger guys? But at the same time, too, I do like the experience for the younger guys playing FIBA game. Like, I think that's where, guys who just wouldn't get moments like this. You mentioned some of them, like the Ant Edwards breakout, Paulo Banchero, guys like, the Austin Reeveses and the Bobby Portises and the Jaren Jacksons and Walker Kesslers of the world. And like, so I do think that experience matters for them. I also do think in some cases it is unfair to ask these guys to play international basketball every year. Like, it's just impossible. I think, unfortunately, bringing it back to soccer, the other reality too is just like, it is competitive. Like, it's pretty wide open every year. You've got 9-10 teams that can realistically go out and win the World Cup. It just, it's getting there, because it's happened. It happened in 04, like you said, with Argentina. We saw it with FIBA this year with Germany winning. And even a lot of these teams in FIBA this year, like, they weren't at their peak either. Jokic wasn't playing for Serbia. Giannis is going to suit up for Greece. Team Canada can be at their peak and run a bunch of NBA guys out now. Like, we've seen what it can be in the past. And I'm with you, because I think, I go back and I look at that 08 USA Spain gold medal game and how fun that was and what that can be. And so I want those talent matchups every time. It's just tough. Like, I understand that, especially with a guy like LeBron, is you get to be 37 years old. Like, you're playing in all these finals and all these other things. Like, that's also just a curse too, I think, of America having the best league in the world. It's like, you're already kind of on this stage and with the spotlight. Like, the international game doesn't boost you the way that, it maybe can boost some of these other guys.
No, you're definitely right. And it is a bit unfair to expect these guys, especially when you consider when you compare it directly to soccer, because you're talking about guys who play 50 games in a year that's spread out throughout the entire year with constant breaks, for international soccer players versus, NBA players that play 82 in a more compact season. Yes, they get a bigger break in the middle, but it's usually if a Jokic plays, all the way through to the NBA finals, we're talking about June, July, and then the Olympics are right there. He's got to jump from Denver finals all the way to the, to the Olympics. So yes,
Yeah.
in that scenario, it is a bit unfair. And I agree with that. But I there's something about the product that is diminished when guys just kind of come in and out at will. And that's my issue. And if to me, if the superstars always committed to playing in the Olympics, then that's one thing. But it's not always in the Olympics. LeBron didn't play in the last Olympics. And then so it's like, what is, like that's my view of it. It's like if there was a steady, that okay, FIBA, and it kind of is this way, and FIBA is, these second tier younger guys versus, and in the Olympics it's the better players, but it's not always the best players, and that's kind of my point.
Well, and in a way, because I do think to that token, it's made you kind of, with the FIBA World Cup, because I know the U.S. didn't win this year, but they've certainly won in plenty of other years, and there are guys like real superstars who really showed up for Team USA. Like I think about Kevin Durant, who's played a lot of years. Even James Harden, for as much as we give him crap for flaking on these NBA teams, he did play a bunch of those FIBA tournaments. Carmelo Anthony, to me, that's a big notch in his legacy, is what he's done for Team USA. And again, just beyond when he was in his prime, like that definitely, like you said, it sets the tone. It brings that level of pride. And so I do think there is that level of responsibility. We should jump into James Harden for a little bit, I guess, if we have to. He's not at Sixers Media Day. That's not really a surprising thing. There's zero traction on a trade. He still wants to be traded to the Clippers. I don't know what that looks like now I actually thought with Jrue Holiday, there was a realistic 3-team trade that could have been done to make it work. I don't know what the market looks like now, and I don't really know what happens here, but I do know it is going to be interesting with the new rules. So, like, Harden is going to show up, and they say he's going to be a training camp at some point, because you can't just hold the whole year out a la Ben Simmons, because if it's the last year of your contract, they can hold your rights. So James Harden would punt in theory then on free agency, but I truly don't know when I expect James Harden to be traded. Like, I think this could happen tomorrow. I think this could happen a year from now.
It's really the most perplexing situation in the NBA, because James Harden is probably not going to get the contract he wants from anybody else.
No.
And at the same time, it's the closest that his value to any other team is closest to the contract he wants on the Sixers. And it's a very strange situation, but if you're the Sixers, you don't want to give him, a max contract, and anything less than what he's asking for, he's probably not going to take. And so you're in this situation where who's going to give him that contract, and who's going to give you something of value that you're willing to give up a player who is valuable to you. He led you guys in assists. He was a very effective 3-point shooter for you all. Granted, in the regular season and in some playoffs, and obviously in the playoffs is a bit of a question mark, but at the same time, not a question mark. We know what he is in the playoffs. He's not as effective, but at the same time, like, you can't put yourself in a situation to get to the playoffs without regular season James Harden.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I think Tyrese Maxey is a star in the making. He's getting there each year. He's progressing, and maybe this year he takes the leap. But you don't want to give up on a player who right now is your second best player for nothing, to trade him to a situation where he's probably not going to get what he wants. But at the same time, you can't bring him back, because we saw what he did at Houston, and he could easily throw games for you. And it's just like, what do you do? What do you do if you're the Sixers? And I've gotten to the point where I don't consider the Sixers any more of a title threat. They're more of almost a guaranteed playoff team. If they weren't a 6 seed or higher, that would be a disappointment and beyond the expectations I have for them. But at the same time, it's just like, what do you do? What do you do right now? Because you can blow it up, but you're wasting another year of Joel Embiid, and we're year 7, year 8? I don't even know how like, Joel could be 30 right now, and I'd be like, yeah, that would make sense.
He's about to be.
Yeah, and so, like, what do you do if you're Daryl Morey? Like, you're probably going to get fired if you're not in playoff contention this year. And it's just at the end of the day, like, is why I go back to what I'm saying. It's probably the most perplexing situation in the NBA, and I have no idea what I would do in that scenario.
It's like there's fault everywhere. There's not an acceptance of reality everywhere. Like, I do feel bad for James Harden because James Harden took less money and definitely helped the team out last year. It's also just like you hit it on the head. James Harden is not getting a 5-year max contract from anybody. Like, he leveraged Houston all season long, and then Houston went out and signed Fred VanVleet and signed Dylan Brooks and said, we're good. We don't need you.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I mean, you've got the Clippers held up. The Clippers aren't going to move Terrence Mann to get James Harden. Like, if that's the point where we're at, and because I'm with you, like, James Harden is not an objectively bad basketball player. He for sure has value. Like you said, career
21 and 10 last year.
Yeah, among the league leaders in assists. Like, James Harden still has a lot of value left in the tank. He also just clearly has flaws and is now on his 3rd straight team of asking out as soon as it got a little messy. So, I don't. I mean, you would think for Harden, if he wants to get moved, that he would make this as smooth as possible, but I don't think we've clearly seen that be the situation in any time ever. So you're right. I don't know what they're going to do. I will say, for the Sixers perspective, I think they're on Embiid watch. I think that, I mean, he tweeted the other day, look at every team in the East getting better except us, pretty much. And it's the truth. And they have no means of getting better other than trading Tyrese Maxey. And at that point, it's like, what are we doing here? Like, that's all we got, basically.
You've done that move before. You've traded the young assets for a superstar basketball player. Are you going to do it again and put yourself on a clock yet again? Because if the best you could probably get for a Tyrese Maxey is probably going to be like a Bradley Beal type. And if you put Bradley Beal on this team, does that net what you want? Probably not. No. You're talking about an Eastern Conference loss, if that.
I mean, I think
so go ahead.
I truly think you could have got in on the Dame conversation if you put Maxey in it, but that's about it. Like, that's probably the best one you would have got. And do I think that Dame and Embiid wins the title? No, not just with them.
Yeah, and not with Harden. And, not those three together, because I think at that point, Harden still wants out, and you're still not going to get value for him. And you're talking about a team with depth issues at that point, because it's not just Tyrese Maxey for Dame. It's Tyrese Maxey plus some assets.
Yeah, like you said, it'd be picks, it'd be young players. They need a lot to go right. I said it earlier in the show. I think they're somewhere between a 3 and a 5 still. I think they're, around Miami. I think they're around Cleveland. I think they're around New York.
Is that with Harden, though?
No, I think even with Embiid and Maxey, I don't think they're much lower than 6th. I mean, the team is, like, a lot of the other pieces are still there. Like, you've still got the reigning MVP. If Maxey takes even a little bit of a leap, like, I think they're still, the Eastern Conference is kind of wide open. Like, who's jumping them, I guess, is my question.
I mean, you would think Cleveland would make a little bit of a jump. Miami can always put it together, even though they're just such a veteran team that they don't play guys in the regular season that much. So, you could see Miami being the 3 or 4 seed, Cleveland being the 3 or 4 seed, and then Philly in that 5th slot.
Yeah,
like that's kind of my viewpoint on it.
No, and that's exactly where I'm at too. So I mean, realistically, I think that's probably where they end up. But like you said, not a threat to me come playoff time, unfortunately, for the zillionth year. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. Appreciate you guys as always. Big shout out to my friend Sam B. Albuquerque. Follow him on Twitter at Sam B. Albuquerque on Twitter. Of course, check out all his work in the Spartanburg Herald-Journal. High school sports in full swing right now. I know big Friday night lights guy, but definitely hoops going on down there sooner than later too. So a lot to catch up on that. Justin will be back next week. So if you're looking for him, just, tweet him, harass him. You'll find him. Watch the podcast on YouTube. Just search Drive and Dish NBA podcast. And again, you can find the show wherever you find a podcast. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad, or read them on the show. If you're not an Apple user, Google Play Store, Spreaker, Spotify, TuneIn, Amazon Music, and we'll see you next time.